Displeased with her stepfamily's cruelty, Cinderella decides to eliminate them through a gruesome revenge. Lord Arthur one day finds himself in a precarious situation. He visits his second wife, Katherine, in the barn and urges her to flee their estate. Confused, Katherine questions the reason for this sudden decision. Arthur explains that the king mistakenly accused him of stealing his jewels and placed a bounty on his head. Instead of helping her husband, Katherine aims a gun at him, leading her accomplices to appear. Arthur tries to subdue the masked men, but they overpower him. Betrayed, Arthur asks why she committed such an act, and the woman reveals she's actually the thief. Now that he knows her secret, Katherine orders her accomplices to silence him. Shortly after, Katherine approaches Arthur's sole daughter, Cinderella, and deceives her. She lies that Arthur stole the king's precious Persian gems. At first, Cinderella refuses to believe her, but Katherine tearfully tells her that the king's men executed him. As Cinderella mourns her father's passing, Katherine alarms her that the king's men are hunting her too. They suspect Arthur stole the jewels for her, causing Cinderella to wish to appeal to the king. However, Katherine slaps Cinderella and tells her she has convinced them to leave her on the condition that she'll be under her custody. 3 years later, Cinderella has become the dedicated housekeeper for her stepfamily. Upon entering Katherine's room, Cinderella ignores her stepsister Josephine's taunting. This pushes Josephine to sabotage her hard work by breaking a vase. Katherine hears the commotion, and Josephine frames Cinderella as the culprit for the broken vase. The poor woman denies her claims, so Katherine asks Josephine about what caused such a scene. Unremorsefully, Josephine accuses Cinderella of stealing from her mother's drawer, leading Katherine to bestow punishment on her. That night, Josephine, alongside her sister Rachel, lures Cinderella outside their estate by making strange noises. The curious woman checks what it might be, only for the siblings to spook her. Afterward, they chase Cinderella until she is cornered. The siblings taunt her by telling her it's her punishment for breaking Katherine's vase. Then they proceed to beat her with a stick. The following day, Katherine informs her daughters that Prince James will be holding a ball and is probably seeking a wife. Excitedly, the siblings begin to prepare themselves to attend the gathering. Later in Katherine's room, Cinderella asks for permission to attend the ball, but her stepmother strongly forbids it. By the evening, Cinderella's alone and she begs the gods to help her attend the ball. She emphasizes that she wishes to feel important, even for one night. Feeling like her wish is futile, she leaves the altar. As she continues her chores, Cinderella hears knocking sounds coming from the wardrobe cabinet. She opens it and discovers the wardrobe appears to be a magical portal. Suddenly, a woman clad in an exquisite dress appears from behind Cinderella. The mysterious woman introduces herself as her fairy godmother, but Cinderella thinks she is merely a fragment of her imagination. She stresses that she heard all of Cinderella's wishes. Therefore, she'll grant her wish to attend the prince's ball. Though ecstatic, Cinderella believes she won't make it since it's getting late and she doesn't have an invitation. Moreover, she doesn't have a presentable dress to wear for the gathering. Her fairy godmother criticizes her pessimism, causing her to reveal that she's a powerful being. With this in mind, Cinderella wishes to have a dress, and the woman grants her wish. Upon waving her hand, Tom Ford, Vidal Sassoon, and Christian Louboutin emerge from the portal to give Cinderella an ultimate makeover for the ball. Once she's ready, Cinderella wonders how she'll reach the castle, so her fairy godmother summons her carriage. Her mode of transportation happens to be an orange car, confusing Cinderella. She expects there'll be horses, but her fairy godmother explains that the vehicle is powered by electricity. To top it off, her fairy godmother introduces her to Elon Musk as her chauffeur. Before she leaves, her fairy godmother reminds her not to waste time as the magic will disappear by midnight. Meanwhile, at the ball, Rachel straightforwardly tries to make a move on Prince James. However, her display of promiscuity repulses the royalty, so he abruptly excuses himself, pretending that he must speak to an important nobleman. Lord Rathbone is honored that the prince has approached him to converse. Prince James says that he prefers his company over those who pursue him because of his wealth and status. Funnily enough, the nobleman actually has the same intentions. He introduces Princess Sakura of Japan to Prince James, and the royalty's discomfort is evident. Still, he shows the princess hospitality. Lord Rathbone takes his drink, which signals that he must invite the princess to dance. During their dance, Cinderella arrives, which infuriates her stepfamily. Katherine threatens to hurt her, but the prince's footman intervenes. Regardless, Katherine insists they expel her from the gathering. emphasizing that Cinderella is merely a servant. The prince's footman questions Cinderella if Katherine's claims are valid, but she denies it. To prove that she's welcomed at the gathering, she shows her invitation. He acknowledges her invitation and welcomes her to the ball. Upset, Rachel tries to throw her shoes at Cinderella, but her family stops her from creating a fiasco. On the other hand, Cinderella crosses the ballroom in Prince James' direction. Like the crowd, the prince turns speechless by her beauty. Without hesitation, he approaches her and takes her to dance. Shortly after, Prince James expresses his appreciation for Cinderella, especially her remarkable character. Moreover, he can't deny the beauty she possesses. Prince James wishes to see her again, so he asks if he can visit her manor. However, Cinderella tells him she's unsure, so she volunteers to visit him instead. This pleases him, but he makes another request. This time, Prince James asks if he can kiss her, but Cinderella refuses to be a spectacle at a public gathering. Prince James clarifies that he wants to kiss her hand, to which she laughingly agrees. Once the prince places a chaste kiss on her hand, he compliments her lavender scent. Cinderella becomes bashful, but her smile fades when she notices that the time is nearing midnight. She abruptly bids him farewell, but the prince insists she stay a little longer. Though Cinderella wants to be with him, she rejects his invitation and proceeds to leave. Outside the castle, the prince is able to follow Cinderella, and he pleads with her to disclose her identity to him. Cinderella remains firm in her desire to remain anonymous. Prince James communicates his feelings to her, and she reciprocates. As she's about to leave, Prince James pulls her close, leading them to kiss. Cinderella resumes her departure, but she accidentally leaves one of her glass slippers behind. Prince James recovers the said slipper, which he'll use to find her. The next morning, Josephine and Rachel order Bennett, their coachman, to whip Cinderella as punishment for intruding on the ball. By noon, Rachel discovers that the prince's footman has visited their estate. Josephine suggests they hide Cinderella from him, fearing he might recognize her from the ball. For this reason, Katherine orders her daughters to restrain Cinderella. Upon entering Katherine's estate, the footman informs them that Prince James is looking for the mysterious guest he fancied last night. Katherine confidently confirms that he's come to the right place. To test her claims, the footman introduces the glass slipper to them and explains it'll determine who the prince's future betrothed is. Rachel excitedly takes her turn, but the footman alerts her that the slipper doesn't fit her. Regardless of his warning, Rachel insists on wearing it and even uses his head as a support. Tired, the footman requests Katherine for a glass of water. While the footman's away, Josephine tries wearing the slipper, but it also doesn't fit her. Katherine is determined to wed one of her daughters to the prince, so she orders Josephine to cut off her toe. She reasons that once Josephine becomes the queen, she won't need her feet anyway. Hesitantly, Josephine accepts the knife from her mother's grasp and proceeds to cut her toes. Katherine commands her to wear the shoes, but Josephine is too disturbed to function. Therefore, Katherine forcefully puts on the slipper to Josephine's foot, but it still won't fit. Just in time, the footman returns and chastises them for their shameful deed. Disgusted by their opportunism, the footman announces his departure. Cinderella hears this and she tries to call for his attention but fails. Out of fury, Katherine goes to Cinderella's room and slaps her. She reminds her of her low status, emphasizing that the prince won't marry a peasant like her. Then, she proudly exhibits the jewelry she stole from the king. Before leaving, Katherine threatens to end Cinderella's life if she continues to disrupt their plans. In the evening, Cinderella summons her fairy godmother. She confides in her about how her stepfamily maltreats her. Her fairy godmother advises her to take her revenge and make them suffer. Initially, Cinderella is unsure about pursuing it, especially since she can't stop herself from feeling guilty. Her fairy godmother gives her a mask that she enchanted with magic. Without revealing its origin, her fairy godmother encourages her to use it to conceal her sinister side from herself. Moreover, her fairy godmother blessed the mask, which will grant Cinderella strength and power to defeat those who wronged her. After making up her mind, Cinderella goes to the woods to deal with her first target, Bennett. The man notices the masked woman, unaware that it's Cinderella. Abruptly, she vanishes, so he draws out a knife to defend himself. Cinderella strikes him from behind, startling him. Though she has the upper hand, Bennett's able to subdue her. Afterward, he unmasks her and discovers she's Cinderella. When he slams her to the ground, Bennett grabs a few strands of her hair. He blatantly sniffs it in front of her, causing him to desire her. As he approaches Cinderella, she breaks his arm and kills him with a knife. A while later, Cinderella moves to her next target, Rachel. She lures her outside by peeking creepily at their window. Rachel, with a knife in her hand, heads to their garden to confront their unwanted visitor. Upon reaching the middle of the hedge maze, Cinderella menacingly appears, provoking Rachel to attack her. Cinderella is unafraid and overpowers her stepsister. Frightened, Rachel begs her not to kill her and even forsakes her family just to be unharmed. Suddenly, Rachel remembers Cinderella, so she strongly suggests that the masked stranger should kill her. Cinderella insults Rachel for her cowardice, making the woman realize who's behind the mask. This angers her, so Rachel charges at Cinderella. Despite putting up a fight, Rachel perishes under Cinderella's hand after she gouges her eyes out. To finish her off, Cinderella slits her neck. The next day, Cinderella awakens from her deep slumber and notices that her hands are covered in blood. Instead of getting sickened, Cinderella revels at the rush the crimson hue has brought her. Meanwhile, Josephine energetically visits Rachel's room in hopes of awakening her so they can attend their grooming appointment. Rachel shrieks in fear when she discovers her sister's eyes on the pillow. Katherine rushes to her out of concern. Later, Josephine searches for Rachel in their garden thinking that her sister's only pranking her. In the middle of the hedge maze, she comes across Rachel's lifeless body. Because of her daughter's demise, Katherine goes to a ruthless mercenary's lair to seek his service. However, she arrives while Hogan is in the middle of being intimate with an escort. Still, Katherine welcomes herself in, signaling an end to their intimacy. Hogan, whom Katherine has previously worked with, proceeds to ask her about what service he can provide her. Back in Cinderella's room, her fairy godmother informs her about Katherine's plan to seek Hogan's services. She warns Cinderella that the mercenary is nefarious and good at his profession. Therefore, she advises Cinderella to end her revenge tonight, especially since Josephine's suspicion is heightened. Cinderella refuses to put on the mask again, intriguing her fairy godmother. She wonders if the mask excites her to kill, and Cinderella confirms. Yet, she finds herself dirty for feeling such a way. Even with her reason, her fairy godmother encourages her to continue her revenge. On the other hand, Hogan examines Rachel's body and reckons that the culprit for her death is a man due to the severity of her injuries. Not long after, Katherine and Josephine discuss who might be the culprit for Rachel's demise. Josephine believes that Bennett might have killed Rachel out of jealousy from attending the ball. She reveals to her mother that the pair has a secret affair. At that moment, Hogan enters Josephine's room, which upsets Katherine since her daughter is in her nightdress. Hogan doesn't hide his ogling, and Josephine finds his actions flattering. Furious, Katherine orders Hogan to find Bennett. That night, Hogan returns to Katherine's estate to report about Bennett. He doesn't fully divulge his true fate and invites Katherine to check it herself. While they're away, Josephine lounges at the dining table and pours herself a glass of wine. She hides the cork in her undergarment and begins to feast on her mother's chocolate truffles. All of a sudden, she hears a strange sound upstairs. Josephine checks the stairs, but she finds no one. Just to be sure, she grabs a stick only to come across Cinderella. She tries to strike her, but Cinderella counters her attack. Immediately, Josephine ascends the stairs. She tries to hide from Cinderella, but she is able to find her underneath the bed. When Cinderella grabs her, Josephine recognizes her, so she throws profanity at her. Cinderella orders her to beg for mercy, but Josephine refuses. Instead, she draws out the wine cork and stabs Cinderella. Josephine overpowers her, so she begins to beat her up. However, Cinderella grabs a stiletto and stabs it to Josephine. Meanwhile, Hogan guides Katherine to Bennett's body. He hypothesizes that the culprit might be within her household since there's no evidence that an outsider was involved. Left with no options, Katherine investigates Bennett's body and locates Cinderella's hair in his grasp. Fueled with rage, Katherine, alongside Hogan, rushes home, only to see Josephine's lifeless body. Upstairs, Katherine orders Hogan to capture Cinderella as she swears to kill her. In compliance, Hogan heads to Cinderella's room and searches for her. Cinderella unexpectedly appears and strikes his head with a porcelain figurine. He stumbles to the floor and tries to shoot her. Quick on her feet, Cinderella escapes, compelling Hogan to follow her. He locates Cinderella and shoots her. Now subdued, Hogan then questions how Cinderella possesses the mask. He reveals that he wore it when he killed Arthur. He clarifies that Katherine orchestrated her father's demise and even framed him for stealing the king's jewels. Unable to control his desire, Hogan proceeds to disrobe Cinderella, but he discovers she's wearing a bulletproof vest. Immediately, Cinderella unsheathes his knife and fatally stabs him, a way to avenge her father's death. After dealing with Hogan, Cinderella faces Katherine without the mask's help. In Katherine's room, the woman shoots Cinderella, but she dodges it. Without a choice, Katherine uses her gun to beat her up. However, Cinderella's rage causes her to overpower her stepmother. Cinderella grabs Katherine's rifle and tries to shoot her, but the gun has no bullets. Katherine laughs at her and insults her. Provoked, Cinderella feeds Katherine with her ill-gotten jewelry. Katherine pushes her, so Cinderella threatens to stab her with a knife. Before she executes it, Katherine kicks Cinderella, causing her to fumble the knife. Katherine wields the weapon, so Cinderella quickly flees. While she's on her way out, Katherine throws the knife at her, which lands on Cinderella's back. Outside, another physical altercation manifests between the two women. Katherine hits Cinderella with a pan, making her stumble. Cinderella grabs a croquet mallet and strikes it on Katherine's leg. Then, she ends Katherine's life by fatally hitting her head. One day, Cinderella awakens and Katherine's footman enters her room. He is relieved that the woman's unscathed. Cinderella asks how she ended up in her room, and the man informs her that she's been locked in her room for days. Curious, Cinderella wonders where her relatives are, and the footman sadly reveals they're dead. With this in mind, the footman tells her that a police inspector is waiting for her outside. Cinderella faces the inspector, who turns out to be her fairy godmother in disguise. Committed to her character, her fairy godmother pretends to interrogate her about Hogan's body on the floor. Since Cinderella feigns innocence, her fairy godmother makes it appear that Hogan tried to steal the king's Persian jewel from Katherine's estate. Following their interaction, Cinderella heads to the palace to try on the glass slipper. As Prince James helps her wear it, he discovers that she's the woman he's been searching for. The next day, Cinderella and Prince James get married. Afterward, they consummate the marriage. The following morning, the townspeople happily recognize Cinderella as the princess, which seals her happily ever after. It's all thanks to her fairy godmother.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.